I think we should have a conversation tonight, albeit truncated, about this pressing issue of the promulgation. Because they say all kinds of nonsense about it. And they have other people echoing them, not many, but they are on the defensive. They made a rash act. And this promulgation of the Parliament of Guyana by the President of this country amongst the greatest constitutional deception in the history of Guyana. You know that we have been regaled with a farce of a soap opera called the Rodney Commission of Inquiry. And in that Commission of Inquiry, at least I learned for the first time that there was a referendum in 1978. That referendum presaged the 1980 Constitution. And they started criticizing this Constitution even before it was voted, saying that it was a dictatorial Constitution and it wanted to create a dictatorship. You hear me, comrades? But I don't know, there's something that says the longer things, the more things change, the more they remain the same. I am pleased to announce that after its promulgation, neither executive president of this great party of ours, your party, the People's National Congress, neither of them did what Donald Ramotar has done presently. They never desecrated that Constitution as President Ramotar has done. And what happened? They criticized it. They criticized it that we had a dictatorship, which was untrue. It was untrue, and let me show you why. In 1992, when this government came to power, when they acceded, one expected that the first thing they would have done was to remove or replace this Constitution that was so bad and that they had reviled. I can tell you this, Guyanese were all flabbergasted when the late President Jagan, in response to this question, said that Guyanese did not have to worry about him being a dictator. They could see how he lived his life. In other words, he and the PPP embraced this same Constitution that they were telling all the world was so bad and that it would have created a dictatorship in Guyana. And they all have hugged this Constitution right down to this very minute. All of the PPP presidents, they have found no fault with that Constitution. And so what they had done over the years was to have perpetrated the greatest hoax in this country, and indeed, the world. They had opportunities to remove this Constitution and or to amend it in a fundamental way. They did not. Instead, when there was this Constitution Reform Committee, all these people did was to remove the right to privacy that was in that Constitution. And you know why they did that? You didn't ever know. They never had a conversation with you before they removed that right to privacy. They did that so they could tap your phones freely. But when you dig a pit, the Bible says, and you put your net in that pit, you happen to fall into your own pit that you dig for yourself. Ask Anil, comrades, when this man Williams and the man Felix II had some conversation taped up, they went all around the world making noise about it. But all of y'all look at it, all of you heard it. Was there anything criminal about it? Is there anything criminal about this one though? So comrades, what I wish to tell you is that came 2011 and then you spoke. You the people spoke to this government and you put an end taste majority. And you decided that you were voting for the opposition. And that created something that was unprecedented in this country, where the opposition is in the majority in that parliament of ours. The chance to advise the president, but the president and his advisors were enjoined to read Article 70 together with other provisions in our Constitution and keep it with the architecture of the Constitution. It's like a building. You can't get a roof without the walls to support the roof. But they failed to do that. And what happened? There is an overarching provision in our Constitution which came in recently, Article 13, which provides for an inclusionary democracy. That is everybody being included in the debate and decision-making processes of our country. But Article 7 collides with Article 13, since it excludes the representatives of the majority of the Guyanese people. In other words, it is exclusionary. And if they had looked at Article 13 in conjunction with Article 17, they would not have adopted this course. So they misapplied it. Again, Article 70 collides with two other fundamental provisions in the Constitution, and they are your right to freedom of speech and your right to freedom of assembly. Freedom of speech, you recall, when the PPP went to the House, when we passed a resolution to gag Rohi, and Chief Justice Sam said that he was first and foremost a member of Parliament, and he was elected by the people to represent them in Parliament, and he could only do that by speaking in Parliament. The Bungagi. So what happens now, comrades? How are we going to represent you? The majority of the Guyanese people who elected us, if the Parliament is shut down arbitrarily? That's a question the Chief Justice should start pondering, and President Ramatar also. But let me tell you this. This prorogation thing takes us into dangerous waters. As I said earlier on other occasions, in suspending Parliament for 6 months, this government has silenced the voices, your voices, and you are in the majority. Secondly, it creates the first constitutional dictatorship in Guyana. So don't let anybody come and tell you any nonsense anymore. Running Commission of Inquiry or else. Don't listen to them. This is the first time a provision in the Constitution has been used for a dictatorial purpose, to shut down the voices of the majority. And thirdly, it means they alone running this country, they alone governing you. And it's in their roots, it's in the veins. Because don't forget, they were always Marxist, Leninist, one party rule, and yet they're telling you nonsense. Paramountcy of the party. What is this, comrade? If they alone will govern Guyana from now on, isn't that paramountcy of the PPP? Are you going to allow that, comrades? But the thing that bothers me most is that without our scrutiny, they can freely put their murky hands into the coffers where your money lies. And you know, even when we were in Parliament, we tell them don't spend, they still spend. So you must say now there's no Parliament, comrades. You're going to look for the shot for your back. But would you allow that, comrades? Would you allow them to empty your coffers? Let me tell you, some linear descendants of Ananias and Sapphira, you know them? They are trying to tell us that we were taken by surprise. Now, I don't know how we could be taken by surprise and Gail Teixeira were complaining how we still had a parliamentary sitting. The thing looked so well ordered, all the speakers were focused, that she thought it was a regular parliamentary sitting. So how could we have been taken by surprise and we were able to do that? But let me tell you, it is nothing, there can be nothing further from the truth. Because do we have to discuss what options are available to this PPP government? Is that our duty in the opposition? To tell y'all, but you know, the PPP could dissolve, but you know, they could also prorogue. That's not our study, it's not my duty. And so we were not surprised. We were just, I would say, we were so taken aback because what came to mind was this saying, this aphorism, that whom the gods want to destroy, they force make mad. Because there's only a madman would do that. Prorogue a parliament where the majority of the people represented there have been elected, duly elected by the majority of the people in the country. So we were not taken by surprise. And already the world is condemning this blatant assault on democracy. You know, I believe the OAS Secretary General would have been harsher, but he didn't know, but I don't think they told him about Article 13 and the fundamental rights provisions in Articles 446 or 147. Because why he had to come out is because in the OAS Charter, there is a specific provision which prohibits any government other than a government elected democratically and by the ballot. So he had to come out. But now he's saying, yes, they acted within the Constitution, but the Constitution is not one provision. You have to look at the Constitution holistically. And so we will have to write him and let him know that. Of course, the Caribbean, they're following suit, and it's picking up strength. The diaspora has also written, the Secretary of State, Mr. Kerry, and even the Ms. Rice has also been written to in the American government. So when you listen to the government right now, they are on the defensive, and they have to be on the defensive because there's no way that we would countenance this. And latterly, the ABC ambassadors, the diplomats from the ABC countries, they've also called for very early end to this prorogation. But comrades, a clear consequence of this prorogation is that it cannot be business as usual. It cannot be business as usual. And so what you find, despite shutting down the parliament, the government wants cake and bake. Having curtailed our business for 6 months, it now proposes to spend your money to send its minister, Ali Baba, to London to represent our parliament at a Commonwealth Parliamentary Conference. Y'all know who's Ali Baba though? Y'all don't know who's Ali Baba? But you know about Ali Baba the Forte? My God, it's so much. But the point in fact is, how could you shut down the parliament and then send your minister to represent the parliament in London? How could you do that? When you have banished the parliament, you have obliterated the business of the parliament. How could you represent a parliament that does not exist, comrades? For sure, APNE will not fall into that trap. We can't send no representative of ours to go to represent a parliament that doesn't exist. And so as Martin Carter aptly describes this regime of propagation, and I quote, "This is the dark time my love. It is the season of oppression, dark metal, and tears. End of quote. And I want to ask you now to follow me and say no to PPPC dictatorship. No to PPPC one party minority rule. No to the prorogation of our parliament. Yes to national and regional elections, comrades. Long live the people of Guyana. Long live the People's National Congress reform. Long live a partnership for national unity. Long live Brigadier David Granger. Long live democracy. Thank you, comrades.